right, welcome to the show. Another episode of the Strictly Fighters podcast. Let's get straight into the meat and veg of this sumptuous dish we're about to serve up. Fight Night Blaydes versus Lewis recap. Craig, out of all people, called this result. What are we saying about this, Sean?
Got lucky. You got lucky. There was no way in your fight knowledge. There's nothing there to give you that sort of insight. It's not fair.
Well, fuck you. No, listen.
Good call,
if there's one thing I know, it's brawlers, and when you've got 120 kilograms behind you, you have all the shot at taking someone like that out.
It's a heavy man.
That's two of me. Heavy man. It's literally two of you.
Although it doesn't sound that impressive when I say it like that.
Also probably double the talent, but what can you do?
That's debatable.
Yeah, but you called it. You called it one
balls.
punch as well, which is good.
And you called the round.
Beginning of the second.
Yeah, but mate, that uppercut was
vicious.
I don't even know how to explain it. It literally made me nauseous as soon as it landed. I was like, oh.
Dude, I felt sick. I felt like I didn't know how to feel. It was disturbing.
Yeah.
And the scary part is he didn't even land that. He literally he hit his face, but it went straight into his like chest. It didn't even like square hit his like straight on in his face.
But that's normally what gets the knockout. It's because when you
blunt
hit
force trauma.
Well, it's actually a function of the brain's defense mechanism. So when you hit the tip of the jaw or somewhere that is going to cause the head to spin very quickly, its defense mechanism is to shut down. So you don't necessarily have to be hit very hard. You just have to be hit with the right angle that your brain shakes.
Is that what they call the button?
Yeah, because the button is where the sort of they always talk about a nerve or something being there. I think it's got to do with that being the base point of leverage. So if you're hitting that point, it's got the longest distance between your chin and the back of your head, which causes a large amount of rotation when you get hit.
That blows my mind that if you're going to hit him there, and like you said, the leverage on his chin, how does that not snap your neck when, like, if your head's twisting?
Conditioning.
Because
but
every action movie, they show a guy just twisting a head and break a neck.
That's a movie, Craig.
Fair enough.
We're gonna do an entire episode on fake movie shit. You know what I mean?
That's true.
We have
Listen,
to.
Right? That's
even Seagal will be the focus.
I can reference enough movies, so it's perfectly okay.
Steven Seagal will be the star of that episode.
So what are we saying about those two punches that Lewis landed after Curtis Blaydes was clearly stiff as a board on the floor?
You don't stop until the ref stops you, mate.
Right? I've seen fights where guys have not taken that path and haven't carried on when they've seen that the guy is completely knocked out, and the ref hasn't stopped the fight, and the other guy actually comes back to life and pulls some Undertaker shit.
Yeah.
And then the guy loses the knockout. So I agree. I think it's completely up to the referee. And like Derrick Lewis was saying after the fight, it wasn't his fault. It's the referee's fault if he's landing those.
Yeah, but who was going to expect that to happen, dude?
Yeah, but the ref was also standing 4 or 5 meters away. Like,
I would stand even further away from those two men.
That's also true, but you would think you'd be slightly closer than that, because Blaydes hit the ground and then he only started running. He's like, oh shit, I probably should do something. Something's gone wrong.
It is controversial, but because Herb Dean's probably the best referee in the UFC.
Oh, he is. He's a prize-winning referee, dude. Yeah.
So.
No one would have known that was going to happen. I mean, first of all, he was going for the takedown. He was stupid the way that he went for it. There's no wonder he was going to get knocked out. We'll look at that in more detail in a sec. But the fact that Blaydes went down after he had gone for the takedown, it actually looked from Herb Dean's point of view that he actually was going for the takedown still, because he was going in that sort of that motion, that going for the legs sort of takedown motion. And maybe in Herb's mind, he was thinking, okay, the takedown is still taking place, until he saw him hit the ground. And I mean, then it's a split second between.
In medical terms, they call that rigor mortis.
Dude, that looks so bad.
Yeah, I suppose when he hits the ground, it's a split second for Lewis to just drop down and land those
Yeah.
two. But they're brutal though. Those last two punches. Oh,
So we can all agree then that, like Jorge Masvidal says, they were super necessary.
Absolutely. This is a fight game, man. You don't stop like rugby. You don't stop until the ref blows the whistle. Just like
So-
football, you don't stop
so-
until the ref blows the whistle.
yeah. So
fighting.
from a grappling perspective, what do you think he did wrong there? The way he came in then?
He didn't set it up. He didn't set up the takedown at all. I could see him telegraph that takedown from the moment he's sort of put his weight in his back foot, and Derrick Lewis saw the same thing. You don't do that when you're trying to take someone down. You're always setting a takedown up with some sort of strike, whether it be a kick, whether it be a combination 1-2, and then going for the takedown. You need to take the guy's attention away from the red zone.
And he just shot blindly.
Yeah, he just shot blindly. He was shit scared of getting hit. So I think he just wanted to get the fight to the ground as quickly as possible.
In addition to that, though, if you listen to Derrick Lewis's post-fight interview and his post-fight press conference, he was 1000% prepared exactly for that specific moment. He was saying that the only thing he was waiting for, he didn't care about anything else, was for Blaydes to shoot so that he could counter with an uppercut or a knee. So he basically had a singular frame of mind throughout the entire fight that anything else happening around it didn't really mean anything.
And you'll just
it was when he came in for that takedown, that was the moment, and that he was going to counter that with an uppercut or a knee, and he executed that plan to perfection.
Perfectly, man.
To your point in the previous episode, Craig, about knockout artists being lucky, this kind of proves my point, where that was a vicious knockout, one of the best knockouts that you'll see in the heavyweight division, and it was completely planned down to a T.
Yeah,
he knew exactly what he went in there to do, and he knew exactly what Blaydes was going to do. So
let's get into that, right? Because Sean wrote a blog. How all our great debates start. Sean wrote a blog about striking versus grappling, putting the two arts together. There was a quote that I took from the blog post that goes like this: "I would bet on a high school wrestler with average striking defense to beat a world-class striker with no takedown defense every time." By the way, you guys can check the blog post out on strictlyfighters.com. It is live. So go and have a look and read the full article if you want further context on that. But let's get into that pseudo debate to me, right? Striking versus grappling is a fun debate, but to me it's a pseudo debate because the plain and simple absolute truth is that you need both. If you want to be a mixed martial artist, you have to have a ground game and a grappling game, and you have to have a stand-up and striking game. They don't necessarily need to be equal. People come from different bases, from different martial arts backgrounds, but you have to have both. That aside, Sean, if you can contextualize for us what we're talking about in terms of the effectiveness of striking versus grappling from an MMA perspective, and then from a self-defense street fighting perspective.
Sure. So from an MMA perspective, when you're looking at striking sort of versus grappling, it's like you said, you need both. But if you are looking at transitioning from one to the other in terms of in the fight, so for example, what happened the other night with Blaydes and Lewis. When you're striking, you're dealing with what we call the green, red, green zone, which is essentially when you're outside of striking range, you're in the green zone because you can't get hit at that point. Then there's the red zone, which is striking, whether it be or punches. Then the green zone, which is once you manage to close that distance and grab your opponent, because it's difficult to create any sort of meaningful force from. I mean, you could do it with an elbow, and we've seen knockouts from an elbow from within the clinch, but it's very unlikely. And a good grappler is going to be able to avoid the person's arms. So what Blaydes did wrong, I think it's probably best to sort of use that as an example, is that red zone. he didn't do anything to mitigate the danger in that zone. Like I said, he didn't set up that takedown. All right. The thing is with striking, and why I consider grappling to be more effective than striking, like you said, in an MMA context, this is a useless debate because you do need both. But why I consider one to be better than the other is because when you're striking, the only distance control you do have, or any control in the fight that you do have, is the distance control, is the moving in and out of that red zone, and getting your strikes off and coming out again. As a grappler, you almost want to reduce the risk of any sort of strike on you at all. So you want to get past that red zone. And when you've passed that red zone, you've essentially taken all of that person's arsenal and nullified it, because you've taken them into your game now.
But what you're saying is you have to do something in the red zone to get to the next green zone. You can't
Ideally,
just go from one green zone straight to the other green zone.
No. So it's the opposite. So you need to do something from the outside green zone to prepare you for the red zone. So, for example, Lewis's defense was that uppercut in the red zone. What I would have done was, I said what I would have done, what a fighter should do in that scenario is, and what we do in jiu-jitsu very often, is use it like something like a teep kick, or at least the leading leg kick, just to at very least keep the person at distance when they're distracted by the leg, when they're trying to push the leg away, trying to catch it, trying to do something with it. You've now distracted their defenses, which is essentially their two arms and their knees and their legs. Once those defenses are down for that split second, you go in, you shoot through the red zone from the green to the green and get your takedown. Why I think
for those who are new to MMA and martial arts, a teep kick is a front kick.
Yes.
It's a kick to the front part of the body, whether it's solar plexus or stomach, or even to the face, if you ask Anderson Silva.
Yeah,
Jay would know all about that.
Yeah, I asked Jay how that feels. He just came from one.
Yeah, man, straight to the ribs. Yeah, struggling to breathe.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to deal with, man. So as a striker, that's your only real game, is moving in and out of striking distance and managing, obviously, zones within the octagon. So you're managing, holding that center of the octagon, keeping the person on the fence. As a grappler, once you close that distance, a striker needs to overcome a lot, and normally is unable to do so unless they've got some sort of ground game, unless they're able to, one, prevent the takedown. So even if you are able to shoot from green to green, if they have some wrestling and they're able to stop the takedown, get you back into the red zone, get them back into the striking game, that's normally what strikers are trying to do nowadays in MMA. But as a grappler, if you're able to close that distance, get the person to the ground, a striker is now drowning in deep water. Unless they've got some sort of experience in the grappling game, they're just not going to know what to do. It's just that simple. In a self-defense scenario, a similar principle applies. That red zone is always going to exist. You want to reduce that risk of getting struck at that distance, especially in the street, because you're not hitting. If you get knocked, and like Craig said, and like you said, Jay, there's a striker's chance at a knockout, and you can get lucky from time to time. Even guys who've never trained striking at all, they will from time to time get lucky. So and the first thing I say in the blog post is, if you are in a situation, in the self-defense situation, and you are in the green zone and you can manage to get away, that's your first run.
Yeah. So I have a question on that now. So what do you do if you're someone like Blaydes and you're watching back videos of Lewis's fights, and the grapplers he's gone up against get him to the ground, and all he does is stand up?
Okay, so it sounds that simple.
But he does that. It's the weirdest thing.
Okay, he uses the person's weight. So, for example, in side control, if the person's over him, like that, if the person's center of gravity is on the other side of his body, he'll use that momentum and roll and then get up. There's techniques for getting up this way. It's actually a really good way of getting out of side control. So to say that you just stand up, it's not that simple.
No, I get it, but you see a lot of fights go for minutes at a time where they just pin to the ground, trying to get through the grappling techniques and making sure they're controlling it. But multiple times now we've seen Lewis literally, as soon as he goes down, he finds a way to literally just stand up, even if the guy's on his back. He just gets up.
Okay, so he's a gorilla. He's huge. He's a very, very strong individual, man. If he could probably lift a train off of him if he really wanted to. So yeah, if you've got a really, the only way he's going to be kept down is if you've got a really good grappler on top of him who can essentially nullify the way that he's trying to get out. But you have to have
But it does depend on the opponent, because when he went up against DC, who is
that's
a
also a large human
wrestler,
being,
also a large human being, but they're all heavyweights. But when he went up against DC was able to completely nullify his game on the ground. He couldn't get up. He couldn't even take a breath. He was completely outgunned by a superior wrestler. So, he it's not every single fight that he's just throwing people off of him to get back up to his feet. It also depends largely on the credentials and the prowess of the opponent across the cage, from a grappling, from a wrestling, from a jiu-jitsu perspective.
Yeah, but that's got to be part of your planning going into that, right? Because he would have seen him do that a few times. You got to think about what grappling moves would prevent him from just standing up or rolling out of it or whatever it may be. But once again, when you're in the ring, you're just.
Well, this is what I want to move into now in terms of I guess more of the self-defense scenario, but I think it's also applicable to MMA. Now, the famous saying is that all fights start standing up, right? Everything starts at a distance. And not to counter your point, Sean, but to bring it around full circle, the things that you highlighted from a stand-up perspective that are beneficial are things like distance management, range, I guess, which is a similar thing, and then timing as well. So a person who is only a grappler, who doesn't study stand-up, right, they're not going to be very good at those things. So they're not going to have the intuitive understanding and feeling of range, of distance management, and of timing that a stand-up striker would have. So in essence, what you're talking about there is the fact that for them to get through and progress through those zones actually is a lot more difficult because they don't have a stand-up game. Whereas if they trained in stand-up, they would have a stronger mastery of distance management, of range, and of timing. So, by virtue of that, there's also things from a stand-up perspective that if you're not training, that makes it more difficult for you to compete against it. The other thing is having a strategy in a fight versus chaos theory. And this is where it pertains to what Craig is talking about in terms of trying to have a plan or trying to counter what you see or what you know about other fighters. If you think about the famous Mike Tyson quote, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yep.
And that's something that I would imagine becomes a much bigger principle in a street fight, where you can have a plan going into a street fight, but the millions of different variables that you have to deal with and the million different ways that a fight can go, if you're fighting in the street with obstacles around you, with maybe weapons, with people, with concrete floor, like those are all things that you can't control.
And not all of us are Jackie Chan.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a quote that I found online as well, which I quite like. The jiu-jitsu master Carlson Gracie Sr., he once famously said, punch a black belt in the face once, he becomes a brown belt. Punch him again, purple, and so on and so on. And the point of the message here is that there's a threshold where the damage taken by a jiu-jitsu or a grappling specialist also causes them to lose technique, to lose focus, to lose the plan that they have. I think, and Sean, you can jump in here and correct me if I'm wrong or corroborate the point. One of the biggest assets of jiu-jitsu is flow, is flexibility, is being able to roll into various different situations, get out of them, gain advantages in them, in a kind of controlled chaos, if you like. So, there's basically, my point here is that you're probably actually there's more of an advantage being a grappling specialist, being able to fight in the clinch up close in that it's the second green zone, I think you called it.
Mhm.
And then obviously being able to morph that into a fight on the ground and control it there. Then being a stand-up striker or a boxer going into some kind of self-defense scenario with your hands up like this. And those are kind of your only tools. In chaotic fights as they go, I would tend to agree with you. Even though I'm a stand-up striker and I prefer the stand-up arts, I would have to tend to agree with you on that.
Yeah.
If you're talking about a actual like bar brawl, street fight, whatever you want to call it, I agree with that 100%. That your jiu-jitsu skills is probably going to come above boxing, because no one's going into a street fight. Okay, guys, keep your distance. Get in, get out, get in, get. They're going to go in as hard as possible. And generally, if you've seen any kind of street fight, they're in each other's faces instantly.
Yeah, but to say that striking doesn't play a part in a street fight would be stupid.
You're swinging, right?
Okay, so when you're talking about a self-defense scenario, you aren't necessarily talking about the green, red, green zone. It still applies. That still exists. But in a self-defense scenario, you need to look at it in the sense of not necessarily zones, but rather levels of defense. So, for example, a teep kick might be running away would be my first level of defense. My second level of defense, if I can't get away, would be a teep kick, because that can keep them at a further distance. It can prevent them from striking me. If they get closer than that, my next level of defense is my hands and my knees, because that's the next level of defense. After that, they're in my face. Now we go to grappling. We can go to the clinch, but that's not going to work really well in a street fight, because the guys normally aren't going to know how to fight from the clinch, and they're just going to try and tackle you. And as a grappler, I'm just going to let them tackle me and get to the ground safely, and then and convert the situation. But so in a self-defense scenario, it's quite difficult to apply the green red green zone. It still applies, but you need to look at it in a different perspective, because it really is rather dealing with levels of defense rather than green, red, green, because you aren't trying to cross those thresholds. If in a self-defense scenario, you're crossing them involuntarily. You're doing it because the person attacking you is forcing you to do it. And if you've got tools for each of those levels of defense, you're much better off in a street fight. But like I said, first thing you should be doing if you're in a street situation, a self-defense situation, is get out, because you never know how many people are going to be coming for you. You never know if there's weapons involved and all the rest of that jazz.
Yeah, and if there's anyone listening to this that thinks Sean's a little bitch for wanting to run away from something like that, I agree with you guys. But continue, Jay.
It's not about being. It's not about being.
I'm joking,
I mean,
man.
In a street fight, just to sort of harp on that point. There's no ego. There should be no ego. If there's ego involved in a street fight, you deserve to get your clock reset. You know what I mean? You shouldn't be involved in a street fight just because you want to prove a point.
There's also just too many variables.
There's
far too many variables to take into account when you're in a self-defense situation.
Unless you have the kind of distance management, range control, and timing of somebody like Conor McGregor, who can maybe rock back and just sleep somebody in an instant with that left hook as they're running in, fists flying and going absolutely mental. Yeah, exactly.
But that's mastery of timing, right?
But that's what I'm saying.
Exactly,
like you'd have to be an exceptionally high level striker to be able to be calm enough and cognizant enough of everything that's going around you in a self-defense situation that is outside anything competitive or governed by rules, to be able to pull that off. Do you know what I mean? And like we say, everyone has a puncher's chance, but that's all it is. It's a chance. And that's not what you want to take in a fight, is a chance.
It's also not a movie. They're not coming one at a time. So if you've ever been in a bar brawl, you know the guy's coming with friends generally.
Absolutely.
So there's just too many variables to take into account there.
Yeah, I mean, okay, talking about if you do get in a self-defense situation and you are one-on-one with someone, which does happen. It happens quite often. Craig, you and I've been in fights where we're fighting one person at a time on the streets. Jiu-jitsu is going to be the answer, because you don't need to. I mean, the whole point of jiu-jitsu, it's called the gentle art for a reason. You're trying to end a fight with the least amount of force, with the least amount of damage done to either the person attacking you or you defending yourself. Because the last thing you need is a lawsuit because this person decided to attack you and you knocked him out, hit his head on the ground, and now he's dead. That's the last thing you want. So with jiu-jitsu, if the situation does escalate to that point, you're able to control it, and you're able to hold the person in place until either they calm down, you can make peace with the person. If they don't want to calm down and you don't have time to wait for the authority or someone else to come and help you, you can submit the person. If he doesn't tap and walk away, you break his arm or choke him out. It's as simple as that. And that's that's the thing about jiu-jitsu, is you've got these levels of intensity that you can start applying.
And control.
Of control as well. And to your point, Jay, when you were saying that quote about when a black belts get punched, they become a brown belt and become a purple belt. I'd put a blue belt over someone without grappling experience any day. You know what I mean? So you can punch me as many times. Okay, obviously, if you get punched, you're going to get dazed, and getting dazed is not pleasant. And if you get punched a few times after that, because you're dazed, you're stuffed. So I mean, there's always going to be variables in a fight, and that's something you need to consider.
For the non-South African, stuffed means fucked. So so here's a random question for you. Like you said, it's the gentle art, and it's designed to create the least damage. Why aren't police in the US or wherever training in exactly that? Why aren't they jiu-jitsu experts to be able to take down any kind of suspect with the least amount of damage and making sure, okay, take them to prison, whatever the case may be?
Yeah.
It's a valid point, right? Because
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu stems from judo, which was a Japanese art that the samurai, correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, that the samurai practiced as a last form of self-defense if they lost their weapons in war and combat situations. So, if you it makes sense. It makes sense in terms of law enforcement and modern day, I wouldn't call them samurais, but modern day law enforcement, learning an art that helps you in those close hand-to-hand combat situations.
Yeah,
so they're just being trained to shoot. That's the problem.
I mean, here in the UK, you can't really apply that logic. But again, I've seen how law enforcement here has dealt with things, and they tend to just hit people until they're compliant, which isn't great. I mean, it's not the way you want to be enforcing law. What was I going to say now? So in law enforcement, so yeah, Gracie University is actually doing a lot of work with law enforcement. They tend to focus on more self-defense oriented jiu-jitsu rather than competitions. So being able to use jiu-jitsu in real life situations. They do a lot of work with law enforcement, with militaries, various arms. The thing is, and it's research that they actually did into why police forces and law enforcement aren't actually using jiu-jitsu or aren't actively asking the people to start training it, is two specific reasons. One is budgeting restrictions. To train jiu-jitsu and to be effective at it, you need to do it on a regular basis. And this requires regular training on a weekly basis. So you need to be able to, if you are requiring people as an employer, as the law enforcement department, or if you're requiring your people to undergo this training, you need to pay for it. So one is budget restrictions.
Okay, on that first point, firstly, every large organization like that, whether it's government or not, have a learning and development budget, or even police probably have a gym in their headquarters for their people are meant to be fit, right? You're chasing people down the street, whatever it may be.
Have you seen the state of some of these people?
You've been watching Bad Boys too much.
Yeah,
bro.
This is the point. But that's exactly it. And that's probably why they're getting the results there. But if you have a gym, hire a jiu-jitsu trainer, and instead of gymming, put them through fight training on a regular basis.
That's why I say a lot of them are moving that way now that they're realizing that liability insurance is gonna be a lot better if you can restrain someone without hurting them, because you're not opening up lawsuits and things like that.
Okay, what's number two?
Injuries. So the thing about jiu-jitsu is when you're training jiu-jitsu, you do get injured from time to time, and that's just the nature of escaping arm bars and escaping heel hooks. Not that you'd have to train that as a law enforcement officer, but you do get injuries in jiu-jitsu. And the problem is when you are injured as a policeman or policewoman, you are out of work, and then they need
you're
to
a
find someone else
liability.
to replace you. So there's
Occupational hazard.
occupational
Yeah.
hazard, but you don't want your occupational hazard to be in training. You want it to be in the real life scenario. You know what I mean? I mean, like I said, more and more people, more and more law enforcement departments or whatever you call them are moving into using jiu-jitsu and these sort of gentler sort of ways of restraining people. And I mean, you can see there's stories all over YouTube about how officers have been able to end a hostile situation just by controlling these aspects.
Yeah.
So, Sean, I wanna ask you a question here, and it's a theory that I have that you can speak to or disprove. Now, one of the things from a martial arts perspective that becomes quite personal is your own personal physical characteristics. For example, me, I'm quite short and I have no range. So I don't have long arms and I don't have long legs.
Don't say that about yourself, man.
It's
okay.
even as a boxer, it's frustrating, right? That type of build as a stand striker, frustrating build to have when you're going up against guys who are same weight but much taller, have much longer arms, have much longer reach. Because of that, because that applies to you as well, in terms of you being short and you know not having long arms and long legs and long reach. You studied Muay Thai for how long? What, 2 years in Thailand?
Yeah, something like that.
So you've delved pretty deep into a stand-up art, into one of the most prominent stand-up modern martial arts. And then you started training jiu-jitsu, and now you're a jiu-jitsu fucking crazy freak. Do you know what I mean?
As we all get when we get into jiu-jitsu, it's a cult. You should join.
So
I've
here's
got
the thing.
pamphlets. I can give it to you. I'll email you. Please give me your email. Yeah.
Great. Drop his window. Okay, but to that point, then, was it just the love of the art and the love of jiu-jitsu and how addictive it is? And I've seen that. I've spoken to a lot of people, and I buy into that. But was there an element maybe of, for you personally, jiu-jitsu is a better form of self-defense and combat for you because it plays more into your hands from a personal and physical characteristics perspective?
Yeah, very much so. When I was doing Muay Thai, a lot of what I would do was trying to learn how to fight in the pocket because I've got short arms. The people I was fighting was guys with longer arms. So if I'm in the pockets, it's more difficult for them to get a hook in or they can get the uppercuts in. But if I'm defending correctly, it's my advantage if I'm inside the pocket striking from there. But again, there's too many.
Can you explain the pocket?
Okay, so when someone has an amount of reach, okay, if you're able to fight within range. So for example,
it's a place where they can't fully extend their range, or it's a place where they can't fully utilize the extent of their range.
Okay.
Exactly.
So you're basically disarming one of their characteristics, which is range.
So for you to get an effective punch in, you need to be able to hit the person that you're trying to hit at about 2/3 to 3/4 of your punching range, so that you can punch them and punch through them. And if you're inside the pocket, if you're inside that zone, the most they'll be able to do is maybe a short hook or a short uppercut, but they won't be able to get a full reach on their strike. So it's easier for you to deal with as a person with shorter arms and with shorter characteristics. But
it mitigates your risk of being on the end of knockout blows as well.
Exactly.
Whether from kicks or punches.
Yeah. So when I was training Muay Thai, we were doing sparring maybe 2-3 times a week, and I loved it, man. It was so cool. But the issue is I was becoming very sort of my mind was becoming very foggy because of all the strikes that you get. You get smacked in the head how many times a sparring session, and it's real, man. You feel this fog that sort of once you stop sparring. After a while, that you start clearing up, and you're like, okay, I realized that when I was training Muay Thai, I wasn't exactly 100% mentally.
It's like coming off a holiday from Mozambique off the Tipatinta.
Exactly.
It takes 3 weeks and then you sorted.
Exactly. You need to recover from it. So that's real. And I was very fortunate when I was training Muay Thai in Thailand. I had a buddy of mine, David, who's he actually fought in Bellator once or twice, and he was actually, when we were training Muay Thai together, he said to me, "Well, do you want to try and hang around for a session afterwards, and I'll teach you some jiu-jitsu?" I was like, "What's that?" He's like, "Well, it's fighting on the ground. I'll show you what it is." Got into it, and man, I fell in love with it. More and more, I was asking him, "Can we actually spend more time grappling than we do training Muay Thai?" Because the difference was I felt more in control of my own fate. When I'm striking with someone, I have to depend on my defenses and depend on the fact that I'm better at defending the strikes than they are at punching. And that's a very big if. Like there's probably not a chance that that's going to happen. I mean, striking has never been my strongest game. So with jiu-jitsu, it's the opposite. It's complete control. It's reducing all risk. If the person doesn't know how to grapple, they're useless on the ground if you can control them. So that was essentially why I decided to move into jiu-jitsu, because I found it to be not necessarily more effective, because Muay Thai is extremely effective. It's just more as a self-defense art. It just made more sense for me. You know what I mean? And it seemed like something I could train until I was old and gray, which is cool.
Yeah. Oh, you're already gray, but
Yeah.
I think
more gray.
I think this brings me to my next point. Is I want to go back on something that we touched on with Craig in the previous episode around if he had to choose a martial art to train, which one would it be? Craig, you said Muay Thai. Having gone through this conversation now and kind of heard a little bit more context and I guess the pros and the cons behind stand-up striking arts versus grappling and ground game arts, has it changed anything for you, or do you still think Muay Thai would be the one that?
I don't have much to lose by getting hit in the head. It's, I'm okay with it. I'm more comfortable on my feet. I've got a very low center of gravity. We're good there.
Okay, so what is the answer?
I'd probably stick with Muay Thai.
Okay. It's a good art, man. It's really good fun to learn.
The thing is, I think I'm coming from the perspective of watching it. So I've watched jiu-jitsu through the UFC fights or whatever. But when I was in Thailand, we went to go watch these fights and it wasn't these hugely famous fights. You just went and watched the locals like throw their kids in a ring, and then they have the main card of these 18-year-olds beating the living shit out of each other. It was insane. These guys were ripped to shit, and it was just beautiful to watch. And it was primal, I guess. It's not as tactical as you would think jiu-jitsu is. Like everything you watch online with jiu-jitsu, everything comes down to one small movement here, adjusting yourself there and being able to keep the flow.
So basically what you're saying is you're a lazy piece of shit.
Massively fucking lazy, mate.
So I mean, I get it. I mean, it's essentially boxing with all the other cool things included. It's the knees, the elbows, the feet. It's everything. I mean, it's what you would want out of a striking art. This is why I got into it originally, and it's why I was about Muay Thai like I am about jiu-jitsu. I got so deep into all aspects of striking at the time, and it's all consuming. And like I said, it's a really, really fun art to learn. And if you get good at it, it's lethal. It really is.
It also blows my mind that when these guys are kicking at the speed they do, the guy on the receiving end still has the presence of mind to be able to check those kicks. How do you get your leg up that quick to make sure you're blocking a kick that's coming in at that speed? That is huge presence of mind.
Yeah,
insane.
it's also got to do with awareness. I mean, if when I fight, when I strike, I don't watch the person. I watch the person's chest, because when I can see their chest, I can sort of understand what the rest of their body is doing. I can tell when their hips are moving, because when their hips are moving in a certain way, it looks like they're going to kick me. I know I can anticipate that. When their shoulders are moving in a certain way, I can anticipate that. So
It's called telegraphing.
yeah, and essentially your hips and your shoulders are going to be a tell, no matter how good you are at preventing yourself from telegraphing.
So when in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Sean, how often and what is the level of depth of the curriculum of training takedowns? Because from my limited understanding of Jiu-Jitsu, which is based largely on, first of all, what I know from you, second of all, from what I know and watch and consume from MMA and UFC in general as a fan, and then third of all, and least of all, from the very little bit of rolling that I've done in our gym with some pretty high level jiu-jitsu guys, but obviously very basic stuff, is that my understanding of jiu-jitsu is the majority of it is on the ground. But now even and this goes back to what we've just been speaking about, right? You have to get somebody to the ground. So would you say jiu-jitsu is still a complete system of self-defense in that regard, in that it allows you and you train how to get people to the ground as well? The intermediate kind of martial art, if you could call it that, would be judo in my mind. The way that I see it is like, okay, to get somebody to the ground using takedowns, using throws, using flips or whatever, that's judo, right? That's the core of judo. So how prevalent is that in jiu-jitsu, and what kind of techniques are there in jiu-jitsu for that?
Yeah, good question. So Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, which is more self-defense oriented, has got a lot of striking defense, closing the distance, and taking people to the ground. So yes, there is Jiu-Jitsu that includes that in the curriculum, but most BJJ schools don't include takedowns in general. If they do train takedowns, it's because they're coming close to a competition, and the competition doesn't allow pulling guard. So essentially, going on your back and pulling the person into you, it'll be against the rules. For example, ADCC is like that. So
Yeah.
a lot of guys
ADCC.
um
What is ADCC?
it's a tournament. It's essentially the Olympics for grappling. It's submission grappling. Guys from sambo, guys from jiu-jitsu, guys from all over the place sort of compete there. I don't know what it's, Abu Dhabi something. It's but it takes place all over the world now.
Yeah, you see the problem I see with jiu-jitsu there is, from a training perspective, and probably one of the reasons I wouldn't get into it is it's far too intimate. It's because you're not training the takedowns. It's like, hey, yeah, come, get on the ground with me. Just one sec. Come, let's go.
Yeah, it is, dude. And let me tell you, like, you fear for your nuts in a big way.
Yeah, you do.
Because they're just collateral damage. You're rolling on the floor.
Yeah, without a doubt, dude. Without a doubt, that's true. No, it's what was I saying? We were saying something now before Craig interrupted.
Well, on that point, it's good that he interrupted, because I want to get back to fight night. There was another very big point from last week's one. Rafael Alves with the biggest weight miss in UFC history on his debut.
Disgusting.
He was scheduled to fight Patrick Sabatini. He missed weight by 11.5 pounds, which is 5.2 kilograms for our esteemed and educated people who follow the metric system, right? So he was fighting at featherweight. He was supposed to basically be under 145 pounds, which basically means that he would have missed a lightweight cutoff, which is a division above the one that he was fighting in.
I think his scale was broken.
Yeah, what I don't understand is, if you're that far off, why do you even rock up on the day?
To the weigh-ins?
Why wouldn't you just phone him, like, listen, just couldn't do it?
So apparently he ate salmon the day before the weigh-in, fell ill, was vomiting and had diarrhea, and the doctor recommended that the only thing that he could do to get better was to drink water. was to drink a
rehydrates.
shit ton of water. Apparently, he only had 2 kilograms to go to cut to make weight, and then this happened, and then he just couldn't get the weight off because he had to constantly rehydrate.
So he
No.
drank
Which, I
5
mean-
kilograms of water. Yes, sir.
Dude, but that's it, right? I mean, let's get into the weight cutting issue, because it's a crazy thing in combat sports, and there's so much opposition to it, and yet everyone still does it.
No. Yeah.
Craig,
so-
I know.
yeah.
Yeah. Craig, I know you had I know you have some strong opinions on this. Why don't you kick it off for us?
It just blows up. Sean will probably defend him, but just a big name in the game, someone like Khabib.
Oh.
He is fighting two weight classes below his 30 something pounds under his natural walking around weight.
Khabib walks
that's
around
what you
at 187 pounds, which is almost 85 kilograms.
Yeah.
And he competes at 155 pounds, which is 70 kilograms. So he drops almost 15 kilograms, not necessarily the 12 or 24 hours before the fight over a training camp, but I would imagine you're probably looking at between 8 to 12 of those kilograms are dropped in the last 24 to 48 hours.
I honestly don't give a shit about the dangers that you're putting yourself through or any of that. Fight at your weight and train at your best to walk into the ring on the day and be like, okay, this is what I weigh naturally. This is what I'm training to be at. Keep it at a constant and go fight the people in your weight range. Stop being a pussy and going down 2 weight classes. It blows my mind. That's why I love the heavyweights. They're walking in unashamedly at that weight and they want to box.
This is the unfortunate reality of fighting, man. It started in boxing, carried over into MMA because it just makes sense. It's competitive advantage. People take steroids for the same thing. If you can compete and have some sort of advantage, whether it be reach, whether it be speed, whether it be age, whatever it may be, you're going to try and take advantage of that. And if you can compete in a weight class because you managed to get to that weight overnight, because you managed to drop that much water before weigh-ins, you can do that. And the rules allow it. The rules allow you to do that and regain up to 10 pounds of your weight after weigh-in, between weigh-in and the fight. So it's now built into the mixed martial arts. It's endemic. So and it's become a battle all on its own. Fighters are proud of the fact that they're able to get to those weights, even though it almost kills them.
So here's my other counterpoint is, are we seeing fights at their prime? They say that they're getting into the ring in their prime. I disagree.
It depends. What is prime?
They coming back 10 pounds up into the ring the next day, but they are. I don't believe that they reached their prime physical, prowess, ability, whatever it may be, peak to get in the ring and be like, I feel great right now. Like I've just.
Sean wrote a blog post on this. You can check it out on strictlyfighters.com.
You can go to strictlyfighters.com and check that out, yeah?
Quick plug, our shop is live.
Oh,
Do
yeah.
you want to tell us about the merch?
Yeah, so if you guys go to strictlyfighters.com/shop, you can actually go check some sick merch. We're trying to keep a little constant theme through there. We got some hoodies in there, some caps, some shirts. Definitely go check it out. We will be wearing it in future podcasts.
It is fresh as fork.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, guys, we're trying to keep the brand like a black and white, and it really looks clean. I think you guys are going to really, really like what we've got on there.
Yeah, and as part of the Strictly Fighters community that we're busy building, it's a great way to represent it and just show that this is what you're part of and the brand you're talking about. And also the brand we're building around Strictly Fighters is the community building each other up and giving feedback on fighting footage, etc. Go check it out on our last podcast. We actually talk about exactly what we're doing with that community. So that if you want to represent it, go to the merch store and pick it up.
That's it. Yeah, be part of the growing global community, man.
Am I still young enough to say cop it? Go and
pulled
cop
it
it
off the first time, not now.
Yeah, not now. Don't repeat it.
Don't do it again.
It's not cool when you do it again.
Yeah, it's not
I knew I missed it.
I'm gonna cut
Okay,
that.
so back to weight cutting. Sean, two things in the blog post that you wrote, you listed some dangers. So what are the actual physical dangers of these extreme weight cuts that are now endemic to UFC? And second of all, you did a little bit of research around how much of an advantage does it really give you? So talk us through those 2 points.
Man, there's a list. I actually grabbed the list off of healthline.com because it's for me to try and give the sort of medical repercussions of severe weight cuts. I'm not a doctor, so what I did was I just sort of depended on medical experts to explain exactly what the dangers are. So can you list them for us, Jay?
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up for you right now.
Yeah, the last time I searched my cough on Google, it said I was already dead. So it.
But the risks are real. The risks are real.
For sure.
Dehydration is never good. When you're, I mean, our bodies are made up of what percentage water? 90% water.
Yeah,
and if
we're
you
informed. Isn't it 70?
70% water. If you are literally drying up, what percentage?
Like a prune.
Yeah, you're literally drying yourself out. Your kidneys are going to die. You know what I mean? It's not going to work.
Your individual kidneys will die. Just think about that.
Think about that, bro. I mean, people have died doing this. It isn't good. People literally have died.
Okay, I've got the list here. So I'm going to run through it.
Yeah.
Heat exhaustion, heat stroke, seizures due to electrolyte loss, low blood volume, heat cramps, kidney failure, and even coma. And like you say, I think there's 2 people in the UFC or in MMA who have died in recent years from weight cutting.
Who was it? So you and I, Jay, when you were staying in Dubai, we used to watch the build up to these UFC fights. We watched someone who actually passed out on the treadmill, like they were trying to like resuscitate him. I can't remember who that was.
No, I don't remember, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, it's incredible what they put themselves through just to fit into a different weight class. Like I said, bunch of idiots.
Well, Jay, like you said, I mean, if we're looking at whether or not weight cutting does actually give you an advantage, who knows? I mean, Izzy is now going to be fighting. What's his name? It's difficult. I can't pronounce his name.
Jan Verhouwers.
Yeah, at light heavyweight, right?
Bless me.
Yeah. So he's going to be fighting, and they've opted not for Izzy to essentially put on weight.
Yeah.
They are rather going to be focusing on his technique, his speed, because they think that's going to be the ticket to winning this fight. And I tend to agree. I don't think size is necessarily, especially when it's that close, if you're in the same weight
it's not
category.
Because if you look at his fight against Paulo Costa, like this massive meaty juice head who is 3 times Izzy's size. In fact, I don't know, to Craig's point, how the fuck that guy makes it down to middleweight.
Crazy.
He is huge. But yeah, so I mean, to your point, I agree with that. I don't think that's in real life mixed martial arts, it's not a massive factor.
Yeah.
Obviously,
I mean, especially with the weight classes. I mean, the discrepancies are 10 pounds. It's nothing. It's between the weight classes. If there's a 5 pound difference between you and the person you're fighting, if you know what you're doing in a fight, weight to that extent is not going to make a difference. If you're fighting bantamweight and you're fighting heavyweight, that's going to have real world repercussions. Sure. You're gonna die, But when you're looking at people in the same weight category, I don't think it matters that much. But I do think, though, people are cutting to get down to a weight class where they can compete with people who are essentially 20 pounds lighter than them, because they are deciding to fight within their natural weight.
And I know you say that 5 pounds don't make a difference, but if you're talking about professional athletes in general, it's a 1% difference between them that makes the great differentiator from the good. And if you're talking about the professional fight game, that 5 pounds probably makes a significant difference when they're all at that level.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at the fight with Blaydes and Lewis. I mean, he the strike. I mean, the uppercut. He only needed to get that right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He only needed to get that right to win it, and that's what he focused on.
But Craig, you spoke about not fully believing that people who weight cut to a severe degree can walk into a fight, into the octagon in prime physical condition. Completely get where you're coming from, and technically speaking, you're probably correct. Like Sean says, it's just not good for your body. However, if you look at Conor McGregor's run at featherweight, right, at 145 pounds, he never lost in the featherweight division. He cleaned it out in the space of 3 years, and then he beat the only featherweight champion ever, 10 years undefeated, in 13 seconds.
Crazy.
You look at his run at lightweight, he's lost fights at lightweight. If you look at his run at welterweight, he's lost fights at welterweight. Conor walks around at a welterweight, at around a welterweight frame. So, there's arguments to be made up and down.
Then I start questioning how great is Conor McGregor really if he can't fight in his own weight class.
But look at how Conor's been losing. Conor loses with grapplers. He loses on the ground. He doesn't get punched out. He doesn't get knocked out. You know what I mean?
Didn't he just get knocked out?
Yeah, but I mean, it wasn't. I mean.
He got his legs taken out, but yeah,
he got his legs taken out. I mean, but he's beaten on the ground. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's essentially where he gets beaten. And when he's fighting in a weight category where guys are slightly heavier than him, maybe. I mean, I've got the opinion that size doesn't matter that much, but maybe at that elite level, like you said, the 5% difference makes a difference. The 5 pound difference makes that.
But when he goes up to welterweight and takes on those guys have been fighting in welterweight. Every fight they're doing welterweight. He's fighting guys one or two divisions below that. And when he comes up, the punches are harder, the strength is higher, everything is just bigger and better.
And you saw that in the first fight with Nate Diaz in a big way, right? Okay, he went up 2 weight divisions. He went from featherweight to welterweight in the space of 12 days. But you saw that, and he even admitted that afterwards. Like he was smashing Nate's face in with his best shots that would have dropped any featherweight in the world. But at that, with back on a few more kilograms, and if you're more natural at that weight, you're going to be harder to get out of there.
But Nate's also a fucking thug. He's probably been kicked in the teeth 20 times in a pub. So it's he knows how to take a punch and a kick to the face.
So that trilogy is a very real real possibility. What do you think? Who takes it?
After Conor's last fight against Dustin, I don't really know how to respond to this. Actually, I do. I still think Conor would beat Nate again. I think he's the superior martial artist, and I think that it takes a lot for Conor to condition himself to that level. Crazy thing that I heard was before the second Diaz fight, he never ran. It was never part of his cardio conditioning program or makeup. He never ran because he believed that the disadvantages of running for your body and your biomechanics excuse me, are actually worse for you than the benefits that you would gain by doing it from a cardio perspective. But I think he quickly found that out. That wasn't right.
He went up against Nate, who's an Ironman. He does those.
Yeah, he's a triathlete.
He's a triathlete.
Triathlete.
Yes, no, I'm not the only one.
Triathlete. I'm going to invent a new word so that's not as embarrassing.
Stop being a retard.
Have any of you guys watched? Have any of you guys watched Kingdom?
No.
It's a series on Netflix. Yeah, it's a series on Netflix. I think it's a Netflix original. Dude, it's fucking epic. It is so good. The reason why I bring it up is because they are very good at displaying the horrors of weight cutting in a very real way. So I'm not going to get into the storyline and everything, but the way that they show the guys weight cutting in the sauna, dropping salt in the space suits, I don't know what you call them, and how hectic and brutal it is, and how it fucks with your mind, man. It's not just a physical thing. Like that is like that's a hectic thing to go through mentally. In fact,
That
that's
brings me
probably where
back to-
most people break.
That
That's
brings
the-
me back to my
that's the
point,
fight.
right? That brings me back to my point is if you're going into the ring the next day, how are you going in at your prime? I'm not just talking physical. Like you say, that's a huge mental hit. How are you going in
But
mentally
remember, yeah. So
strong
I mean,
for
remember
that
when
fight?
they're dropping, they're not dropping all of that weight, like Jay said, over a 5-day period. They're dropping it over a 3-4 week training camp, most
Yes,
of it, and they're
but
doing it.
a
They're
lot
doing
of
it
that
healthily.
isn't like a terrible last 24
Yeah,
hours stint.
yeah, but remember that most of their weight is calorie loss. So they
Mm.
at a calorie deficit. They're on a good diet and they're losing their weight. So very recently, MMA fighters have realized how dangerous weight cuts
Mm.
are. So a lot of them are taking on sort of nutritional experts that are giving them advice on how to do this properly throughout a training camp.
Mm.
So they will lose as much weight as they think is necessary throughout a training camp, sometimes as much as possible because they need to get down to weight. And then the last bit of weight that they cut is purposefully only water because
Mm,
they can regain that weight almost immediately
exactly.
by just reconsuming that water. Although it's illegal to do this via like saline drips, they have to rehydrate with water and electrolytes that way
Yeah.
naturally. But it's the easiest way to get down to the weight that you need to be at to be at your most efficient and to be at your most effective as a fighter. So maybe lighter than you might want to be, but you are quicker at that weight. So there are advantages to that. But um, what was I saying? Don't do
Sean,
that.
Sean, does weight cutting happen in jiu-jitsu, like in jiu-jitsu tournaments?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fortunate. I compete in my weight category. I don't have to lose weight, but that's because I'm so light. But yeah, a lot of guys have to go through that process. In fact, for mine, I needed to pick up weight because I was below the weight. I was below 60 kgs. I need to sort of notice 50, 58 or 59. I can't remember what the actual weight was, but I needed to actually pick up a little bit of weight to be in that weight category. But obviously, if you're below the weight, you can still fight within that weight category.
So another reason I don't buy into this is because I do fasting. What's it called? The intermittent fasting, and I know that I do not get the most out of my gym sessions purely because I do not have the same energy I would if I got up, had breakfast and stuff.
But we've also established earlier in this episode that that's partly because you're a lazy piece of shit.
Yeah, once again, fair point. But I suppose they've got the best nutritionists in the world.
Remember, they're not starving when they go into a fight. They're just rehydrated.
No, but those guys are starving for 3 weeks.
No, they're just at a calorie deficit. Remember, they're training full time, all day, every day. The amount of calories they're burning, they need to eat just to maintain a certain amount of weight.
Yeah.
So when it comes to weight cutting, it's being able to get to a weight and only drop water weight for the weight cuts for the weigh-in and regain that water. You're back to basically 100% of your effectiveness as soon as you regain that water, because again, you're regaining those nutrients. You're regaining that all the vitamins and all the things that you need, the minerals that you need to be able to perform effectively. It's not comparable to fasting all day, because fasting all day, you've got nothing in you that's going to keep you energized. They do.
It'd be interesting to see if there was any studies done. Maybe we can have a look at that afterwards around the effectiveness of weight cutting from a results perspective. So people moving up and down weight and what the results were, and if there's any kind of correlation between moving down in weight and becoming a better athlete or winning more fights, or even moving up in weight in the same thing. Interesting prospect.
Before moving on, do you guys agree with it? You know my point of view now.
I don't know. Fighters know.
You
know what I mean? Not in the fighters know. If being in a lower weight category as a heavier guy was advantageous, then Oh no, who knows? I mean, Conor McGregor and Izzy might just like the challenge and might just be able to, might just like the idea of being able to say, listen, I'm fighting people who are heavier than me, and I'm still dominating. Maybe it's a bragging factor, but
That's how you become the double champ.
the fact is they're double champs. You know
Mm.
what I mean? Nunes has done the same thing,
Mm.
and she's effective in both weight classes. So does weight actually have any sort of sway in the fight if you're a really good fighter? Maybe at the top echelons where those, like I said, where like you said, maybe those small percentages matter.
I like the way that you say echelons.
That's
Yeah,
how you say it.
I also got a little turned on. But
Yeah, I enjoyed
let's-
that a lot. We should make him say that more.
Yeah.
Okay, guys,
That'll be the word for the week.
There we go. Let's move on to our final topic. It is the preview for Fight Night coming up this weekend.
Mm.
We have Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Cyril
Bless you.
Gane. Yes, thank you, good sir. So Jairzinho Rozenstruik, who is Surinamese Dutch, he is the number 4 contender in the heavyweight division. He has just beat Junior Dos Santos, and Cyril Gane is undefeated in
He's
MMA
also beat
and
Dos
in
Santos.
UFC. He's also just beat Dos Santos. Yeah, he's 6-0. I haven't watched him before this fight, so I went and watched a bunch of his fights and did a bit of research, and he looks like a pretty well-rounded mixed martial artist. Like, he's got submissions, he's got grappling, he's got pretty terrifying striking, incredible physique. Like, he looks like a weapon.
And
But they both specialize in striking, right? They're both striking specialists.
Dude, to be honest with you, I don't know what Rozenstruik specializes in, because I really don't like the guy, and I really don't think he's a great fighter. And I
Tell us what you really
loved,
think.
I absolutely loved watching him getting knocked out by Francis Ngannou. So yeah, I hope Gane does the business. He looks to me to be a more complete martial artist from the limited amount of footage that I've seen from him. So I hope he wins. I don't really have a prediction, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know much about these guys. I know Rozenstruik. I've seen a few of his fights, but again, I've got no real dog in this fight because I've no idea what Gane is capable of. I've not watched many of his fights, but I'm curious to see what happens, man.
Yeah, Rozenstruik's built like a brick shithouse, mate.
Yeah, he's massive, but he's massive. He has a similar build, not as big, but a similar build to Derrick Lewis, actually.
He beat Overeem, right?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, I think he did beat Overeem. Yeah, I think that was like 3 fights ago.
Craig just likes to mention Overeem because he's met him before, so he has to throw it in at any possible opportunity.
Yeah, you got to name drop it like that, man.
Craig, who's that guy that we
Both
saw?
of those guys are Dutch.
We I went, we were there, man. You were with me. We were in Dubai. We were in who's that wrestler we saw? That pro wrestler we saw.
Wow, we're gonna sit
on
in
the tip of
silence for a while. All
tongue.
of us trying to figure this out.
No, it was on the tip of my tongue.
Oh, Chris Jericho.
No, it wasn't Jericho. It wasn't Jericho. Anyway,
where did we see them? Where did we see him?
In Burj Khalifa.
In Burj Khalifa, when we were having dinner at the top.
But he looked.
Yes,
dude.
he,
remember?
Yeah, he looked like the bodyguard for his bodyguards.
Yeah.
Massive human being.
Yeah, he's huge.
I can't actually.
We have to figure this out.
I'm gonna figure that out.
It's the guy that they made all the memes with, where if someone trips, he comes in and slides and does
is it?
Yes, it is him.
Yes, it is him.
I just
What's
can't
his name,
remember
man?
what his name
Okay,
is.
we'll figure it out.
Okay, we're gonna figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
Bring it up in the next
one. We'll keep you on a knife's edge. Yeah, exactly. Stay tuned.
And if you know, comment.
Yeah. Drop it in the comments and make sure
from the beautiful picture that we've painted for you, the feeling
The guy
like
in
you
the
were
memes.
there.
the GIF guy.
Outside of strictly MMA, Canelo Alvarez is fighting this weekend as well for the WBC super middleweight world title. He's fighting some Turkish guy named Avni Yildirim. He's the mandatory challenger for WBC. From the literature that I've read, because I've never seen the guy fight, everyone is predicting an absolute clinic. So if you want to witness the sweet, sweet science of boxing in all its glory, I would suggest that you tune into that fight and watch Canelo Alvarez. He's probably my favorite boxers are Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury, but he's, in terms of a technical boxer, and in terms of the way that he boxes and his style, he's probably my favorite. Him and Vasily Lomachenko.
Lomachenko is my favorite, dude.
These guys
Lomachenko
are
takes
like otherworldly in terms of their ability to hit and not get hit.
Yeah.
So tune in to that. If that
Canelo's changed his game a lot, dude. He used to get hit a lot more. I think he's gotten a lot more clever with his defense. I mean, his movement is looking unreal lately.
I think
it's crazy. Did you see?
A lot of people are realizing that Mayweather was onto something.
I mean, it's direct comparable. I think like Mayweather had a lot of really cool devices that he used with his body, with his shoulder, with his leaning.
You don't get to 50-0 just with the shoulder.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's a different type of evasion.
Yeah,
it's a different type of not getting hit.
Yeah.
It's not directly comparable. Guys like Canelo Alvarez and Lomachenko, they're basically Neo from the Matrix.
Yeah. Neo's my Neo. Lomachenko's my favorite, dude.
Neo's my favorite too.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, Lomachenko, his dad, I don't know, I read this somewhere, but his dad essentially required him to study, I think it was Ukrainian or Russian dancing, the traditional dancing, for like 2 years before he was able to start fighting. And man, what it's done to his footwork. Just guys, by the way, go YouTube Lomachenko's footwork. It's unbelievable. He puts himself next to his opponent. It's crazy.
Is he the modern day Ali?
Yeah, Ali was good, man. I
don't think there's
not much.
I don't think there's such a thing.
Man. Yeah,
but he's a completely different animal on his own. It's mental. Like, so those two guys, before I actually started physically training in boxing, I wanted to box like them. Right, that was like, I would watch that and I'd be like, that's fucking cool. I want to be like, I want to be able to box like that. If I had a style, that's what my style would be. Good Lord, how wrong was I? Because the amount of the years that must take to be able to even get to a semblance of that kind of technical level, in terms of, like we say, the sweet science of hitting and being able to hit and not being hit, is ridiculous. So I quickly learned that that's not going to happen anytime soon. And I had to adapt my game. I actually started watching a lot of Mike Tyson footage when it was announced that he was fighting Roy Jones Jr. in the comeback fight, which was also really cool, by the way, if you haven't seen it. But I watched a lot of footage and I saw a lot of parallels in his game that would work for me, because I'm also a very short boxer with not a lot of range and not a lot of...
He's the king of fighting in the pocket, yeah?
And closing the distance using his legs, like everything that Mike Tyson did, that ridiculous power that you watch, that scary power that you watch when you watch Mike Tyson, that's coming from his legs and his hips, not necessarily just his arms. And there's a lot of things that I recognized in his game that I'm starting to apply now.
The width of his fist is also
working.
15 centimeters, mate.
Yeah, it's a dustbin lid. It's mental.
Anyway.
Cool. But so that's all coming up this weekend. I think we should cap it off there, boys.
Yeah.
FYI, everyone, you can listen to us on all the major podcast hosting platforms, all the major podcast apps. You can also watch us on YouTube. The video version is live on YouTube every week, because we are also ridiculously good looking. That's always a plus. So add that visual element to your experience.
And if you think Jay or Sean are a bunch of fucking idiots, drop a comment and just agree with me. Just a thumbs up.
By the way,
I'm
guys,
good with that.
And if you've got any questions or things that we've missed throughout sort of our discussions, if you think it's a point worth raising, please do put it in the comment section, and then we'll address it the next time, because I think it's good to have the community sort of participate in these conversations and contribute to them.
Cool. Sounds good, boys. See you next week. Later.
Cheers.
Cheers, boys.